The air in San Quentin was thick with tension. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out, plunging the prison into an eerie darkness. Inmates' voices reverberated through the halls, but there was one voice louder than the rest, a voice that had seen it all, a voice that commanded attention. Tony the Beast Delgado. He had been running things for years. Now no one inside San Quentin dared to cross him. His reputation was as cold and brutal as the prison walls that held him. Tony had a system. He had the guards in his pocket. The other gangs? They feared him. He didn't need to fight for control anymore. He owned it. But tonight was different. Tonight, the lights went out. The chaos started slowly, with a muffled scream from cell block B. Then a door slammed. And another. It was the sound of a man's life being taken. A long silence followed. A flash of light, just enough to reveal a figure standing over a body, blood dripping from his hands, his expression unreadable. It wasn't just any body, it was the body of an inmate who had once been Tony's most trusted ally. There was no question in the air. This was a power struggle, but this was something more. This wasn't just a hit. It was an announcement. Tony Delgado had been betrayed. Outside the prison, Detective Sarah Mendoza sat in her unmarked car, a cup of cold coffee between her hands. She was the one who caught the cases no one else wanted, the ones no one cared to solve. The prison system? It was a labyrinth of silence and fear, but there were cracks, small ones, and it was her job to find them. But this time, something was different. It wasn't just the murder of a low-level gang member that caught her attention. It was the way this one felt. Personal. The message carved into the victim's chest wasn't just a symbol of violence, it was a signal, a warning, a territorial claim in a place where the land was already claimed. Sarah had spent years working in the shadows of prison gangs, studying their codes, their rituals, their unspoken rules. She'd never seen a gang execute a hit like this. The victim was a foot soldier, but the brutality wasn't just about sending a message. It was about sending a message to the one man who had the power to tear everything apart. Tony Delgado. Sarah's phone buzzed. The screen flashed an alert. Prison riot. San Quentin. Multiple casualties. She clicked off the notification, taking a deep breath. She knew what that meant. She was about to walk right into the heart of the beast. Back inside the prison, the riot was in full swing. The guards scrambled to regain control, but they were outnumbered, outgunned. It wasn't just inmates fighting inmates anymore, it was the entire system coming apart at the seams. Tony Delgado's empire was crumbling, and no one knew who to trust anymore. Inmates moved swiftly through the shadows, each group with its own agenda. The Aryan Brotherhood, the Black Guerrilla Family, the Crips, the Bloods. They were all here, jockeying for position, taking advantage of the chaos to move their agendas forward. But in the center of it all, one name kept resurfacing. Tony Delgado. Sarah's investigation had led her to a terrifying truth. San Quentin wasn't just a prison. It was a hub, a marketplace for drugs, weapons, and influence. And it was run by Tony Delgado and his crew, the most feared gang in the system, known simply as the Syndicate. No one entered San Quentin without passing through their hands. But now, as the walls of control crumbled, something far darker was beginning to unfold. As Sarah entered the prison gates, the silence was almost deafening. The guards had all retreated to their control rooms, locking themselves away from the violence that raged outside. Sarah, however, wasn't like the rest of them. She had no illusions. The gangs didn't just survive in prison, they thrived. Her contact, an inmate known only as Bishop, had promised to meet her in the prison yard. Bishop wasn't a low-level player. He was an insider, someone who knew the pulse of San Quentin, who knew the players and their movements. He was connected to the underground world of prison politics, a world Sarah had been trying to crack for years. But Bishop had made one thing clear when they first spoke. If you want the truth, you have to follow the blood trail. As Sarah made her way toward the yard, she passed through a hallway lined with reinforced cells, each one housing a dangerous individual. The air felt thick, suffocating. Every step she took seemed to echo in the quiet. She could feel the weight of eyes on her, watching, waiting. They knew who she was, but they didn't care. Bishop was waiting in the far corner, leaning against the wall, his arms crossed. He was a tall man, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, even though the sun had barely risen. He nodded as Sarah approached, his expression unreadable. "Detective," Bishop said, his voice low and calm. "You've got a problem." Sarah stood in front of him, her eyes scanning the yard. "What's going on in here, Bishop?" He tilted his head toward the prison's main building. "It's bigger than just Tony Delgado. The syndicate? They're not the only ones pulling the strings. Someone inside is moving against them. And it's not just for control of the prison. This is bigger. This goes beyond the gates." Sarah's mind raced. "You're telling me there's a war brewing inside the prison? One that goes beyond the gangs?" Bishop smiled, a cold, knowing smile. "That's exactly what I'm telling you." But then, as they spoke, a figure stepped from the shadows. A man Sarah recognized from the prison's records. It was one of Tony's right-hand men, the man who had been seen standing near the crime scene just hours before. His eyes met Sarah's, and in that moment she knew there was no one left to trust. Detective Sarah Mendoza stepped cautiously into the control room, her instincts on high alert. The man who had just walked in, the one who seemed so calm, yet deadly, was the same one she'd seen standing near the body of the slain inmate just hours before. His name was Hector the Ghost Vasquez, and his reputation was as cold and terrifying as the steel walls surrounding them. He was one of Tony Delgado's most trusted lieutenants until today. Sarah's heart raced as she tried to process the situation. She had expected the war between the prison gangs to escalate, but she hadn't expected this. This wasn't just about control within the prison. This was about something far more sinister, something that had been festering for years behind bars. The ghost's cold, calculating eyes locked onto Sarah's. "You're in over your head, detective," he said, his voice like ice. Sarah didn't flinch. She dealt with worse. "I'm here to get answers," she replied firmly, her eyes never leaving his. "You want answers?" The ghost's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "Fine, but you're going to have to walk through the darkness to find them." Before Sarah could respond, the room went dark. The overhead lights flickered once, twice, before completely shutting off. The sound of chains rattled somewhere in the distance, echoing through the building. The only source of light was the dim glow of the security monitors in front of them. On the screens, the prison was alive with movement, an unsettling amount of movement. Sarah felt the weight of the moment settle over her. This wasn't just a routine prison riot or gang war, it was a carefully orchestrated attack on the entire system. The syndicate, once an indomitable force inside San Quentin, was now facing a challenge from within. And she knew, deep down, that Tony Delgado's power was on the line. "What's happening?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with urgency. The ghost remained silent for a moment, his eyes scanning the screens. Then, in a low, almost casual tone, he spoke. "The other gangs are making their move. They're not just looking for territory anymore. They're looking to take down the syndicate and anyone who stands in their way. Tony's reign is over." Sarah's blood ran cold. Tony Delgado was the undisputed kingpin of San Quentin. If he was losing control, the entire prison could unravel. "Who's behind it?" Sarah demanded, her voice rising slightly. The ghost didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to a nearby monitor and pressed a few keys, bringing up footage from the yard. The camera showed dozens of inmates armed with makeshift weapons rushing toward the main building. They were organized, efficient, and most disturbingly, they were working together. "There are more players in this game than you realize," the ghost said, finally, his voice quieter now. "The other gangs have formed an alliance. They've set aside their differences for one purpose, to take control of this place. And the man leading them," he paused, a hint of unease creeping into his voice. "It's someone you wouldn't expect." Sarah leaned forward, her pulse quickening. "Who?" The ghost turned to her, his eyes narrowed. "His name's Marcus Shadow Owens. He's a former syndicate member who disappeared years ago. Thought he was dead. Guess not." The name sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Marcus Owens was a ghost from the past, a name that had haunted the prison for years. He was rumored to have been killed during a failed prison break, but no body was ever found. Now it seemed he had resurfaced, and with him, a new and deadly alliance. Sarah's mind raced as she processed the information. Marcus Owens was dangerous in ways that even Tony Delgado couldn't predict. He was a master manipulator, a man who knew how to work behind the scenes and pull the strings without anyone noticing. If he was leading this new alliance, then the entire system was in jeopardy. The prison was in full chaos. It wasn't just a riot anymore. It was a war. The footage on the monitors was a grim reflection of what was happening inside, the walls, each camera showing a different battle, each frame filled with the faces of men who had been forced into a corner. San Quentin had always been a place where the strong survived, but what was happening now? This was a place where alliances were forged in blood. Sarah stood next to the ghost, her mind whirling. Marcus Shadow Owens had returned, and with him, a deadly plan to dismantle the syndicate. But Sarah had a gut feeling this wasn't just about power. This was about something deeper, something personal. The history between Owens and Delgado ran long, and from what she had uncovered, it had been filled with betrayal and bloodshed. There was more to this than just taking control of the prison. This was about settling old scores. Why now? Sarah asked, her voice edged with frustration. Why has Owens decided to act now after all these years? The ghost's eyes darkened as he watched the screen. Because Tony Delgado thought he could control the game. But he underestimated Marcus. He thought Marcus was dead, and in the prison world, if you're forgotten, you're vulnerable. But why come after Tony now? Sarah pressed. Why tear down everything after all this time? The ghost turned to face her, his expression grim. Because Marcus didn't just disappear. He was broken, tortured, left for dead by Tony himself. And Tony thought he could bury that. But Marcus isn't the kind of man who forgets. This isn't just about power. It's personal. The scene in the yard grew even more violent. Inmates, under Owen's command, stormed the outer gates. Gunshots rang out, echoing off the steel walls of the prison. Sarah could see the chaos from the monitors, dozens of men rushing toward the armory. The guards were overwhelmed, outnumbered, and underprepared for this level of coordinated attack. Sarah knew it was time to act. She couldn't sit back and wait for someone else to stop this. She needed answers, and if the truth was to be revealed, she had to get closer to the heart of it all. We need to stop him, Sarah said, her voice fierce. We need to find Marcus Owens and stop this before it gets worse. The ghost looked at her, his eyes narrowed. You have no idea what you're asking, Detective. Owens doesn't just want to control the prison, he wants to destroy the system. The system Tony built, the one that keeps this place running. He wants chaos, pure and simple. Sarah's mind raced. If Owens wanted to destroy the system, that meant he wasn't just attacking the syndicate. He was attacking everything. And if he succeeded, it wouldn't just be a prison war, it would be a disaster that would ripple throughout the entire criminal justice system. The hours passed in a blur of motion and tension. Sarah and the ghost navigated the prison's hallways, avoiding the chaos unfolding just outside. They finally reached the central block, the heart of the prison. This was where Tony Delgado had ruled for years, where the syndicate had built its empire. But as they approached the entrance, they heard the sound of footsteps echoing through the darkened halls. The doors creaked open, and standing before them was Marcus Owens. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The man who had been a ghost for so long was finally here, standing in front of her. His presence was chilling. He had a way of moving that made him feel like he was already a step ahead, always watching, always calculating. "You've come to stop me, Detective," Marcus said, his voice calm, but with an undertone of menace. Sarah didn't hesitate. "This ends tonight, Owens. The prison, the violence, everything. We can't let it go on." Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You think you understand what's happening here, don't you? You think you can stop it like it's some game. But the game has already ended. And you're too late. Before Sarah could respond, the lights flickered once more, casting long shadows across the hallway. The sound of footsteps echoed again, but this time it wasn't just Marcus who was moving through the hall. The inmates, under his command, were closing in. Sarah knew it was too late to back down. "We have to stop him," Sarah said urgently. "Now!" But as they moved toward Marcus, he stepped back, his expression unreadable. "I don't need to explain myself to you, detective. You don't understand the rules of this place. You never will."